But who knows? My dad and I are sharing together on healthy teamwork. And even before I launch, it just feels worth saying that the fact that the two of us are giving this presentation together is in itself a fruit of a lot of what Micah talked about, in that the gift of a family community that's merging into a church community, and the joy it is, the miracle it is for us to be doing this together, and the great fun it is to be doing this together. So we are basing this presentation on a class we taught for the school last year. We taught a class for the then 10th graders on project management, and we're distilling about a year's worth of content into a 1-hour presentation, and we're excited to share that with you. Where we're heading, why we're talking about this, and I think that in context of what Micah shared, this is a really wonderful support to what she started with, talking about the work of leadership, the work of community, and the purpose and calling of that. And this is something that we talk a lot about here. We talk that this is in our DNA as a parish, that the meaning of life, that God is communion. The highest way that we refer to God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The purpose of life is communion, and the meaning of life and the meaning of our church community is entering into that communion together. Basically, life is teamwork. I say that in meetings frequently, that life is a team sport, that it requires coming together. But this is not just about efficiency and getting things done and a to-do list. While certainly those things are important, God has certainly put a calling on our parish to do a lot of things, and we just came through St. Patrick's Day and our parable of the talents, and so certainly efficiency and effectiveness is part of it, but it's really a bigger picture of building up the kingdom, of working out our salvation together. And really our main point is that working in communion with God and the saints and one another is part of joyfully fulfilling our purpose. And working together well, learning what it takes to take that, maybe the easy picture of being in Mass together, receiving the Eucharist together as that source of our community, of our communion together, and how do we take that into all of the ways that we interact and work together, into our day-to-day life, into the work of the parish, into emptying trash cans and setting up tables, and pulling off major events. How do we take that communion out into what we're doing throughout our day-to-day? So we're breaking our presentation into two main sections. The first is looking at stages of team development, and the second is looking at some really basic project management tools. Our whole tone today, and we kept going at this over and over again when we reviewed our slides, is everything we're saying should sound simple. Everything we're saying should sound like common sense, that this isn't some magical formula that we've discovered, some complicated recipe or exact equation that needs to be carried off, that a lot of this is coming back to some really basic principles that are very powerful and scale into lots of different areas of life and interactions with different people. So you can see most of what we're talking about at many levels of our project teams, our families, our whole church. And we're hoping that if it's simple enough, then maybe you can remember it and use it more effectively. So to kick us off, we're starting to review the stages of team development. And these are commonly referred to by many management, if you take a management class or any kind of leadership class in many colleges and conferences and seminars, there's 4 stages of team development: forming, storming, norming, and performing. And we're going to break down what those look like. And the reason we're doing that is because we want to set an expectation for what's normal, what you're getting into when you're working with people and when you're trying to get people to work together well, so that you're avoiding inappropriate expectations, setting the bar too high for yourself or your team, having unrealistic expectations of what this will feel like or look like, and discouragement when things are hard. I think, Micah mentioned how the hard work involved in ministry and in community life. The fact that storming is the second stage should give you a hint that team building and team development also comes with a lot of rocky patches that are normal and healthy. Stages of development also implies growth, that this growth takes nurturing and cultivation and time, and a lot of times repetition. So the first stage of team development is forming. And this is, in our image is arrows converging, coming together. You're identifying your team members and you're identifying what you're trying to do. Very basic. A lot of times, forming can be as simple as, I want you two to do this, go. And there you go. You have formed a team, and you know what you're trying to do. This tends to be an exciting time of discovery. It tends to be really fun. You're learning about your teammates. You're learning about their stories. Maybe this is someone you didn't know very well before. You're learning about the project. You're excited about what you're trying to accomplish. You're excited about what this will mean for the church or mean for your life or for your family. And it's really fun to think about the positive impacts that this change will bring. It's kind of a bit of a honeymoon in the team forming process. But most honeymoons don't last. So we're going to move on to... So... With that, we're going to move to stage 2.
So stage 2 is called storming. And I think we got a hint of that when you saw all those arrows in the previous slide pointing together. It's just like, what could go wrong, But one of the things that's super common across almost every team I've ever worked on is that at the beginning of projects, what you're trying to do and who's doing what is always unclear. So when you gather your team together, it's tempting to think, why didn't they tell us more clearly what they want to do? Who's going to do what? Am I doing that? Are you doing it? It always, always, always happens. And knowing that can help ease a lot of that frustration that's part of storming of, I don't know what I signed up to, and I'm not sure what I'm doing, and I'm not sure what they're doing. And that creates this part of the, a lot of the storming. But so I think that what is really important to understand is that clarifying those goals and clarifying who does what is not somebody else's job, it's really part of the team. That's part of what you do, is to help shape that. The other part that's naturally part of team building and storming is that as we gather together, we're bumping in to all of our quirks, our distinctive personalities, our ways of communicating, our ways of working, all of our idiosyncrasies, and it takes a little bit of time for us to understand one another and work together in an understanding way. And this takes a lot of patience in working through not just like the project kind of goals and responsibilities, but also understanding how we fit together. Okay, where's the page down button? Just there. So Katie said storming is completely normal. All those arrows now are it looks like chaos. And who likes chaos? So the important part here is recognize that's going to happen. Don't get discouraged when it's happened. It's okay. It's going to be okay. And just patiently working through that. And sometimes I think we've all had those times where it's just like, this person is driving me crazy. And you can either brush it off and just pretend that it doesn't exist, or you can start working on that relationship. And oftentimes when we do that, it's just like, I can't believe you used to drive me crazy. You are now one of my favorite people. But it's because we were willing to do that hard work of working through those challenges. This Lent, this image rocked me when I realized that my place in this picture is King Theoden, Who wants to say, I resemble King Theoden under Wormtongue's thumb? But it's just like, that's me living in my passions. So we need to be sober and alert to enemy whispers. And especially in teamwork, we hear these whispers that puff ourselves up and tear the others down and condemn the others down. It's the enemy's old favorite tricks at sowing discord in our teams and trying to divide us and stir up contention. But we have so much good medicine for this. Every hour of every divine office and every Mass has antiphons, beautiful little antiphon daggers, and beautiful psalms that help us brush off these lies. There are also some other remedies. This is another image that also rocked me this Lent. It's just like, how many times do we look at those icons during Mass? And what I love about them is that they're not static. And as we're looking at them and praying during Mass and during divine office, it's just like they speak different things. And I think in this season, what I saw on this is that Mary is not just tenderly embracing her baby, but Jesus is the body of Christ. This is her disposition toward us. It's just like, oh. And just a couple of days ago, I think it was Friday, one of the collects for St. John, he said, it was something along the lines of very specific about helping us to see the virtues of the saints as we look at these icons. And I think this icon is a wonderful reminder, and I never quite looked at it this way before, especially in the context of teamwork, that Mary's disposition here should reflect our disposition and how we embrace each other, how we embrace the body of Christ, and how we embrace one another in our teams. So as St. John prayed, Mary, this is the virtue in you that we want to imitate as we gather together. I feel so blessed because that wasn't it this Lent. As on St. Patrick's Day, and I'm a crier. I cry at all with all the girls' movies that I watch with my girls, and I'll try to be a man, but on St. Patrick's Day, I'll just be a little bit even more personal. I feel inspired by Micah. But in my last confession, I recognized that when I picked up my icon of my patron saint, I sort of felt like this, Jim, do you notice you're a little aloof with me? I knew exactly what St. James was talking about. I felt like he was too important. Why couldn't I get a boring saint that nobody knows? Not only did I get one of the apostles, but I got the inner circle, one of the three. It was just like, couldn't I get somebody less important? He's too busy. I don't want to deal with important people. Jim, I'm outside of time. I'm not too busy. I'm here for you. So on St. Patrick's Day, when I came to church, and I was just looking at the icon of St. Patrick, I felt like the same kind of thing. It's just like, St. Patrick, thank you for being such an important part of our community. I probably cannot wrap my head around all that you're doing here in our community to help us deepen our community together with you. You're our teammate here. Thank you. And he clearly wants to see us grow in holiness and unity and reach. And I think it's an important part of being mindful as we gather, not only in Mass, but also in our teams. Katie talked about bringing that kind of communion to all of our work, to say, I want to wash the dishes with my Blessed Mother. I want to wash the dishes with St. Patrick. And I want to serve with you in whatever teams I'm serving on, with them and with you. And those are the remedies to the lies of the enemy that look so putrid in comparison, don't they? That would try to divide us. So Kate, is this one yours, Kate? Yes.
I think really the storming takeaway is that the storming is going to happen and it's normal. And it's also has a lot of potential. Just to kind of sum up what my dad said is that storming isn't something to kind of suffer through and avoid. Storming is an integral part of building those relationships and kind of doing the hard work of figuring out how to make things happen and how to love one another well through tricky things. And and the enemy wants to use it as a divisive failure point, what really should be the potential for the most growth and the most intentional development. So storming is something to lean into, of the being really faithful to ask, okay, why is this rubbing the wrong way? How do I need to press through it? And we're gonna have another slide later with some strategies, with more practical, but kind of to sum up, to take something that has the potential to be divisive, but really should have the potential to be edifying and strengthening. Just like, the trees with the deep roots because they've gone through the wind. So the third stage of team development is norming. And norming is when aligning of the team in the same direction. This happens as you're navigating the storming, you're figuring out what routines work for you, you're figuring out what systems, what processes you need, what supports. You're developing a shared understanding of goals and roles and responsibility. You even sometimes start developing, a shared vocabulary. I know, if you think of your families and your teams, there's often like lingo that you develop of kind of the shorthand of things that you learn as a team that's like, I know when we say this really means this. I wish I'd thought of a good family example that would have been fun, but I'm not very good at thinking of anecdotes on the spot. But also, so norming is the learning to cooperate in an understanding way. It's when you're moving forward you can feel that the momentum shift. Which brings us to the last stage of team development, which is performing. And that's kind of when you can kind of sense the difference between norming, of kind of building a effective routine, and performing when things are really, really singing. When you're working as one, you've experienced this, of what the beauty and the power of two or more people functioning harmoniously. The choir is an example, a very easy example of what it takes when you get disparate people with different tones and skills and abilities coming together and doing the work it takes to blend and sound and sing beautifully. You can also think of watching a high-functioning coffee hour team pull off a meal for 200 people, or a smoothly run event, and you can think of that like, oh yes, it's working, and you can feel that satisfaction and that joy and that fun of when it really works well. That's what we're aiming for, of bringing together virtues and skills and accomplishing the mission in a really powerful way. This next slide is kind of a heavy hitter, cultivating team unity, some strategies and reminders of what it takes to coach a team and coach yourself through this process. We could spend an hour on these things and a slide for each one, but I'm just gonna kind of go through these fairly briefly and hope that you can take this away and meditate on it later. And all of these are coming from a place of personal reflection. I think, my dad and I making these notes aren't because we are master team builders who are immune to all lies of the enemies when storming and, always have high-performing teams instantly. We're pulling these out of conversations we've had very recently of having to remind each other of of how to turn your attention. And I love the visual comparison of Theoden and Wormtongue and the Mother of God with Jesus, and kind of how to swap that in our heads. All that's saying is that we're learning this and reminding ourselves of these all the time. The first reminder is this takes time, patience, and nurturing. This isn't something that you can bypass or shortcut. This is something that you have to show up day in and day out and do the work, have the hard conversations, keep going. Be mindful and pray. Don't show up cold to your team. It makes a big difference when you come prepared for a meeting, when you come ready to listen, when you come knowing what your goal is, when you come ready to pay attention to the needs of the others around you, not distracted, not rushed, but present and alert. Grounded in virtues. That's particularly, navigating storming, but all stages of team development really require us to level up in the fruit of the Spirit in our life, in the virtues in our life, patience and compassion, having understanding with each other. As a church, we have a unique challenge in that we are not employees that are all paid to work the same hours every week, that we know everyone's going to always be available for this meeting that's been on the calendar for, 2 weeks. We are a gang of volunteers, often giving out of margins with lots of priorities on top of each other, which really requires a special level of patience and compassion and understanding and resilience to keep navigating how best to pull everyone together. Courage to lead. It's really terrifying sometimes. And having the boldness to step up and bring people together takes a lot of courage. Respect. Really valuing the different opinions and perspectives and strengths and backgrounds and personhood of each of your teammates and showing them respect. Humility. I think one of the most significant challenges, but also huge blessings, is that reminder of humility, of where do I need to ask for help? Where am I making a mistake? Where do I need to repent? Where do I need to ask for counsel? And that posture of humility is so important. We need God and we need one another. Curiosity. This is interesting and fun. Curiosity is such an important word, and we brought it up over and over again in our class, of shifting your posture from a very boring, taskless mindset to I'm interested in understanding the problem. And it helps. Curiosity can be a shift from overwhelmed to engaged, and from I have to get this done to isn't this so, it ends up being really fun. I love when we can come together in different teams. That collaboration, that creativity of bringing people's gifts together is exciting and energizing and fueling and really rewarding. And having a mindset of curiosity helps check your posture into that openness to that creativity and that fun. Attentiveness and listening. 2 ears, 1 mouth. Very common principle. Being really careful to be an active listener, to be in a posture of learning, in a posture of understanding, and in a posture of pausing before and not being reactive, as Micah was saying, taking time to respond well instead of react. And the general thing all of this covers is that thoughtful communication really lubricates the entire process. All 4 steps of team building, all process of project management is really requires a healthy and thorough and consistent communication. The other thing I wanted to point out is that sometimes we have to revisit prior stages. You don't achieve each level of team management, of team building, check it off and move on to the next one and never go back. As things change in your project, as things change in your environment, as you add new people, as things change, you sometimes have to revisit those. And you can think of that in your family, you can think of that in our church, that we cycle through a lot of those, we cycle through these stages over and over and over again. And you can have examples where something in our church changed, led to friction, led to some storming as we figured out how to navigate, how to communicate, how to be on the same page until we could move forward and kind of set up a new normal. And I'm sure you can instantly think of examples in your family and in your teams where you have to be you have to go through a lot of those cycles again and again. So it requires that consistent time and patience and nurturing on a recurring basis.
So we're going to talk in this next section about, we're going to shift from the stages of team development to kind of some practical tools for managing our projects. And we're only going to focus on a few basics, but what we're hoping to show is that these tools are really simple. I don't think anybody should be overwhelmed by them, but they're very powerful also for managing big projects. And we're going to be using a simple example project. And note that I carefully worded this. The project that we're going to use as an example is your mother asks you to take care of painting her guest room, whatever that means. So with kind of an unclear task like that, one of the first things that we have to do is clarify objectives. This is always step one. I remember as a young engineer, when I got my first job, I was working for the Navy, and I was so eager to add value, and I came to my boss and I said, we got to do this, and this, and he would just quietly sit there and smile, and he would always say something like, and he was Jewish, so you can sort of imagine his Jewish accent, so he'd say, with a big smile, so what's the question? And it was just like, and that's what we're talking about here is, so what's the question? And we cannot skip past clarifying the question before we busy ourselves, because if we're aiming for the wrong thing, then all the work that follows is going in the wrong direction. And none of us wants to waste our work. We don't want to do a great job at the wrong thing. So again, objectives are almost never clear at the beginning. Part of our job on team members is clarifying the objective. We talked about being curious and ask lots of questions. Leave time for that. Don't rush through that. This is probably one of the most important pieces, get our aim right. And then importantly, once you as a team feel like, okay, we feel like we know what we're supposed to do, this is a great time to circle back around to the person that gave you that task to say, hey, this is our understanding of what you asked us to do. Is this what you had in mind? And then making any fine-tune adjustments. So back to our example project. Your mom asked you to take care of painting the guest room. What do you think would be some helpful questions to ask her to help clarify that objective?
What color?
What color?
Do you want me to do it or for me to find somebody to do it?
Great question. Do you want me to hire a professional? Do you want me to do it? Oh, did you have this in mind as a sweet project to do with all your grandkids? What other questions? Which parts? Ceiling. Oh, ooh, that's a good one. You want me to do the trim and the ceiling too? Ooh. Time frame. Oh, by the way, we're having guests this weekend. I wanted it done by Friday. Whoo. That puts a different color on things. Yeah. What color? Don't ask me to pick out the color.
Which guest room?
You painted the wrong room.
How much are you paying to do this?
I deserve to get paid for this. How much? What's the budget? Yeah, those are great questions. And I think the same creativity that went in sharing this and the same fun that went into asking these questions is the same kind of way we can do this as teams, whatever our projects are. I wonder what we're supposed to do. Does it mean this? Does it mean that?
Yeah.
Lime wash. Yeah, I really like the color from the ground that we used in the apps in the church. Can we do that? Using the dirt from our backyard?
We're going to spend, I'll say that sentence later. Before we move on, we're going to show you this framework for project management. I got my master's in project management a couple years ago, and my sisters joke that pretty much all of my education and life experience is just about how to be a professional big sister. They're not wrong. And every class, it started to become a game with me because almost every process boils down to this same very simple outline. Plan, do, check, adjust. You'll also hear plan, do, check, act, but adjust is more accurate. And pretty much any approach to handling a problem can be thought of in that 4-step process. You can add different jargon, you can add different vocabulary, you can add, other things to make it sound fancier, but it really boils down to these 4 main steps. Planning the project, which includes clarifying the objective, and we're going to spend most of our time today, we're going to spend all of our time today talking about planning tools because that becomes the foundation for success. Planning, doing what you planned, checking and seeing how things are going, checking and seeing against your plan, against what you're really trying to do you need to shift, and then making adjustments. And it's a recurring cycle of adjusting, updating your plans, continuing to act, continuing to check, continuing to adjust, continuing to update your plans. You see that kind of repetition in how you work in your coffee hour teams. It's a great example of we do one coffee hour, we plan for the coffee hour, we run coffee hour, we check our plans, how did that go, what went differently, we make adjustments, and we do it again. And supporting that cycle are those virtues we talked about. That kind of the understanding that all of those steps require that attention and nurturing and character that we discussed earlier. And at the top with kind of an oil drop is communication. That what lubricates this whole process and makes it run smoothly is clear communication. And my dad had a brilliant example of this cycle that he was going to share with us.
And also, all of this is grounded in virtue. We never separate, the virtue from this. So all of that fits together. And I think the wedding at Cana perfectly illustrates this to show that, even though there are people that this cycle is named for, it's just like, wait a minute, this isn't new. This has been around forever. Somebody planned the wedding at Cana. They had to secure a venue and hire a band and plan a menu. They didn't have to take care of videographers and photographers, but they did a lot of other things. They got clothes ready and food ready. They did it. They followed the plan. They held a wedding. Jesus was there. Mary was there at this wedding. And somebody did some checking. I don't know if Mary did the checking or if somebody told Mary, because Mary is just the kind of person that you're going to go to for help in these situations. But Mary found out they're out of wedding. They're out of wine. So here's Mary's virtue. She could have said, it's not my wedding. It's not my kid, not my problem. Whew. Sorry about that. But her virtue showed in her kindness. And not only did she find out about the problem, but she wanted to help do something about the problem. So there's communications already going on. She further communicates with Jesus. Jesus could have said, and he did say, hey, it's not my time. Not my problem. But Jesus' kindness is shown by being the person that helped make this adjustment here. He provided more wine. And all of this is grounded in great communication between Mary and the servants and Jesus, grounded in this attentiveness to what's going on, to recognizing a problem, to being a part of the solution, the patience and kindness in carrying that out.
Not that miraculous turning of water into wine is a common adjustment step, but if you master that step, that's even better. You're actually the next slide.
So here are the main elements of planning, and we're going to be talking about each of these in detail on the next slides. So we've already talked a little bit about brainstorming. This is about gathering our whole team together and pooling all of our initial ideas for tackling the problem. Work breakdown structure is just a fancy term for an outline. We've all written outlines, since grade school for papers on how we're going to write this paper. Or you write the paper and then you write the outline, which a lot of us did also. But the work breakdown structure is really an outline for the whole story of your project, and it's a way to organize all of your information to say, this is what needs to be done. Gantt chart is another fancy term for this is how we manage time. We're going to add a time component to say, how do the major elements of the project fit together in time? Materials and lists and budget lists help us identify what we need to get and how much it's going to cost. And then risk management is just a fancy way of saying, what have I overlooked that could go wrong? And what am I going to need to do to try to keep that from happening? Oh, this is still mine? Oh, thank you. So I think we've talked a good bit about brainstorming already today, but I think the important thing is this should be an enjoyable, free-flowing, creative discussion where you're really pooling all of the best ideas from all of your team members to help identify how to tackle this problem. And including the full team is really important. I mean, Scripture tells us there's wisdom. I capitalized W on purpose. There's wisdom in the abundance of counsel. When we gather together, 2 or 3, and we're really relying on each other's gifts as body members, the Lord is in our midst, and we experience this wisdom and these good ideas. And really the virtue there is this respect and value that each person here has a unique gift, has a unique story, has unique ideas that none of us individually will be able to accomplish on our own. And Katie loves these toys. Katie, I feel like this is my slide, but you should talk about these.
I think there's some really simple tools. You may or may not recognize Kai's handwriting on the board here. This is our class's brainstorming on how to solve the painting a room project, where we were just kind of continuing on the whiteboard, going in different directions until we had answered all of the why, how, who, what, where, when, how much kind of questions, capturing all that data. And if you all were at the presentation we gave on internal growth, you saw a picture of another of my favorite tools, the Post-it note. Our class also loved Post-it notes too. They're really fun and colorful. And you can put them, cover the wall, rearrange them, move them. Things like that help. Sometimes doing something tactile, visible, moving, those can be really energizing and creative and ways to capture a lot of information, and then you can sort it into the more boring Word document later. And then it becomes, the standard bulleted list with, headings and things that can be more easily shared digitally and recorded for posterity instead of, lose their adhesive and fall off the wall. Is that a good introduction?
Thank you. Okay, work breakdown structure. This is key audience participation. Kai, how do you eat an elephant?
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. You might feel like your project is an elephant and you might be overwhelmed.
And we have a lot of elephant projects.
We do have some elephant projects. So how do you tackle a big project? The same way. One bite at a time. You break it down, you break your big project down into a lot of little projects. You figure out how to tackle each one of those little bits, and then you put it all back together like a puzzle. So one of the first steps in your work breakdown structure is organizing all of those scribbles from your whiteboard or organizing all those sticky notes in a way that makes sense to help prepare your work breakdown structure, which is just, again, an outline. And try to tell the whole story in that work breakdown structure. You don't want to leave out the last chapter of your book or any of the middle chapters or any of the chapters. You want all of the chapters in your book, so you want all of the chapters reflected in your outline. And in the same way, you want all of the elements of your project addressed in the work breakdown structure. And then you review and refine. You review and you refine. You say, oh, we left out this. Or you talk to Father Patrick, and Father Patrick always has other ideas. It's just like, ooh, how did we miss that? We did miss that. Ooh, you're right, we need to fill this in. And you have other people like that that'll help. So that at the end, it's just like, okay, here's our elephant. Our fundraising work breakdown structure, I think, is probably 10, 12, 15 pages long. I don't remember, but it's very long. But we didn't do that all at once. We did it like this, starting with whiteboards and Post-it notes, and then compiling it and reviewing and finding. But you write it at the appropriate level of detail. You don't have to, at the level of detail that's going to be helpful. You're going to write your story later, has all of the color and all of the flavors, but write your work breakdown structure at the appropriate level of detail. It's going to help you.
The next thing, we're kind of reaching the tail end. The last thing we want to do is kind of show you what these tools look like for our room painting example. And I'm going to show you a spreadsheet, but you have to know that a spreadsheet for us isn't a complicated tool. It's a sheet of graph paper that can be shared more easily, that occasionally does simple math for you. So, which is a nice attribute of graph paper. So what you're going to see is kind of the simple version of the work breakdown structure, the Gantt chart, how we added time, the materials list, the budget, and then some risk management. Our project team always liked to consider, what do we do in case of a nuclear apocalypse? Have we thought about a meteor falling and hitting our field day event? Like, do we need a meteor shelter? Like, we decided at the end that the probability of that particular risk was low enough that we didn't have to incorporate it in our project plan, but some brainstorming of crazy risks is really helpful sometimes. Let's see. So the objective, the work breakdown structure, and this spreadsheet become your project plan that you refer to over and over and over again. I forgot to open this when I set up the laptop, so just bear with me 1 second as I find it. First, I'll show you, you can remember that that whiteboard I showed you that had the spider web across the whiteboard in Kai's handwriting? We turned that into a Word document that had, the communication elements, the tools and materials, the types of tools and materials, the process, how to prep the room, the actual process of painting the room, all the different steps for all the different elements, all the different parts of cleanup. So we took the whiteboard and turned it into a Word document. And then we took that Word document and turned it into a spreadsheet. This list on the right is that same work breakdown structure outline in simpler form. The different elements of communication, the different elements of prepping the room, the tools and materials, painting the room, cleaning up the room. I'm just trying to reiterate that we took the messy whiteboard became this very simple outline at an appropriate level of detail. Each of these elements on the left represents a task that has to be done and the category of the task. This chart is also the Gantt chart. This is when we turned it into time, a schedule. Are you stepping in?
Yeah, and it's not important that you see all the detailed words, so don't get hung up on not being able to read the words from the back. Just kind of pay attention to the big idea how these things fit together.
Oh, that probably helped.
Yeah. Oh, that helps. But what I said is still true. Pay more attention to the big ideas of how we move from these different pieces to the next.
Unless you are, in fact, painting your mother's guest room in the next 16 days, we've got a plan for you. I'll hand it to you. You're welcome to run with it. But so you can now see that up at the top we have project days, And we kind of, for our purposes of conversation, we added, this is about a 2-week project. And then we added a time element. We said that communication is going to happen every single day of this plan. We said that prepping the room is going to happen, the first week of the plan is going to be devoted to prepping. That getting tools and materials is going to take this amount of time. That painting the room is going to be spread over the next couple days. And cleaning up the room is going to be the final thing we do. The important thing for this is that it has the level of detail that is helpful for you. We could have, if we'd really wanted to, we could have done colorful bars all the way down this to to indicate a more detailed schedule. For the purpose of our discussion, this was the appropriate level of detail. But in the spring semester, when they planned field day, every single element had a time deadline and a person responded, and what person was responsible for it. Then we took this same list and walked through the process of making what materials are required for each thing. And this doesn't necessarily need to be a purchase list. It could be, finding the tarp from the shed or things that already exist. Basically going through each element of your work breakdown structure as a tool for considering all of the different things you need for your project. And then it's really just another couple steps to turn that into a budget, adding a cost, quantity, subtotals, and final processes. The procedures list, we didn't talk about today, we'll skip that. Risk management, we went through and considered all of the people involved, all the different work breakdown structure pieces involved, the different environment, and thought, what could go wrong? What are we concerned about? And this, I very rarely do a risk analysis in this level of detail where I'm making a chart with this many colors, but that process of thinking, what are we missing? What could go wrong? What are some of the things we're concerned about? And how do we update our project plan to account for that? Is a really important aspect, even if it doesn't look as crazy as this. We color coded based on the risk. We took the probability and the severity and came up with our risk score, and anything in bright red was something, we really need to pay attention to that because we don't want people to hurt themselves when they're moving heavy tools or heavy furniture on the stairs. So that kind of exercise of saying, what could go wrong? How important is this? And how severe are the consequences? And what are we going to do to help mitigate that was a really important exercise. And then, let's see. Any questions about that? I know I went through that spreadsheet really fast. The main takeaway is that this is a really simple process of breaking things down into easy steps that works for painting a room in 2 weeks or, building a however many $1 million campus.
How many classes did we use to build that spreadsheet for that painting project example? Do you remember? We didn't just whip this up.
Oh, yeah, it's true. We did this over a couple days. We took a couple different class periods to talk over each one. But some of that, depending on the complexity of your project, will take, more or less time. But this is something that we didn't develop. We started with our brainstorming, moved on to our outlining, moved on to planning out the schedule and the time, and then, slowly build it as we needed it. Did you have a question, Emily?
Yes, for spreadsheet, what do you mean by the iron triangle?
Iron triangle. Iron triangle, I really want to call on the class to see if they remember, but I'm scared of what will happen if I do. Lucy.
Time, cost, scope.
Yes, time, cost, and scope. And what's in the middle of the, what's the fourth element that's in the middle of the triangle? Begins with a Q.
Oh, quality.
Yeah, quality. So those 4 elements and those are kind of how you handle, those are your constraints that you're dealing with and you're deciding your priorities. If you want something fast and high quality, it's going to be more expensive. If you want something cheap and amazing, it's going to take a lot of time. So how you handle the iron triangle is basically how you decide your priority, how you set your priorities, and how you handle your limitations. But we actually talked about those things in we've mentioned time, cost, and scope in our outlining in this presentation. We just didn't call it iron triangle because we didn't want to overwhelm you with, terms you didn't necessarily need. Any other questions? Eagle eye.
Do you have an example of how where doing this well ends up with like positive service outcomes, and where doing this poorly ends up with negative service outcomes? Is just sort of like refocusing on the, like, what is this actually? What's the goal?
Oh, yeah, sure. Do you have I could give an answer. Do you have an answer? Okay. What comes to mind is that this spreadsheet is a tool for keeping everyone on the same page. And it's a communication aid and it's a planning aid to make sure that things don't fall off the radar, that everything gets addressed, that everything gets covered. So this is only as helpful as it's used. And I know we currently use similar spreadsheets in a couple of the teams I'm in. And I know just from experience that when you're using this, when you're referring back to it on a regular basis, it helps direct communication, it helps remind people of issues, it helps, cover all of our bases. And as soon as we get busy and forget to make updates, and it becomes more important to get things done than to stay on track, it's not surprising, slightly hilarious, and I told you so moment of how quickly things devolve when you're not going back to the plan. I don't know if do you have any other?
I think having a nice simple plan like this just also brings peace to the team. Like, oh, we have a plan. And although we're not thinking about this right now, we have it all written down. So I can rest at ease, and now I'm more free after talking about it. I mean, I think some good project examples around the church, like our class actually did some projects. Our students planned and organized field day, and it was a beautiful event. Seeing Kai and Lucy and Audrey run that event. Kai led like a dad. He was very observant of everything that was going on field day, noticing what was wrong, and stepping in to make fixes. We were so proud. And I wish everybody could have seen that kind of so our young people are doing this and did that and did a great job with it. And they went through all of it to make that happen. So I think that's one of my favorite examples. I think coffee hour, although we haven't had this discussion with coffee hour teams, I think they're already doing a lot of this. I know my team has a really well-organized plan that addresses our scope, our materials list, our budget, roles and responsibilities, and oh man, we got a little low on rice this week. Let's make an adjustment. Let's up our rice next time. So I think the same thing that's happened with our coffee hours. I think it's become something that, this is, I didn't realize we needed this area of improvement, but our community, I think, functions better and is happier and more welcoming and hospitable because we're taking a more team approach to making coffee hour happen.
Now, I would say, obviously they're here because we all think that this is really important and worth talking about, but I would say for our community, I think that we kind of take pride in the reinventing the wheel, doing things new, and there's, great elements of creativity for that part, but we lack in the areas of creating things that last and being able
Yeah, no, that was a great example, that using tools like this helps ensure, both the piece of order and the ability to maintain. I know you have but just one thought to kind of pull some of that together is that we mentioned this a lot when, a couple weeks ago when I was doing that presentation on internal growth, we talked a lot of, and Father Patrick's several things since then and how he's talked about that, of the structure is supporting the culture. The structure is not some magical, we're not a slave to the structure, but the structure is necessary to just support the culture. That the tools that we're talking about give a healthy level of stability and organization to a real group of people doing real things, loving each other and having fun and making messes and growing in the middle of it. That this isn't, that the tools don't become, we don't serve the tools serve us. And that this is not an inhibitor to creativity and flexibility and adaptability. Spreadsheets are very easy to edit. You can easily delete entire columns and entire sections and add new things. And that's a lot of what our staff team does, is take Father Patrick's vision and the ideas and new things that come of that and how do we take that into something that actually happens? And how do we turn all of these 40 ministry teams into, how do we provide stability and growth and support for them? So these are the kinds of tools that are kind of, how do we take this Eucharistic, sacramental life that we're living of, learning to communicate and learning to collaborate and learning to enjoy and appreciate and respect and work together, and how do we turn that into something stable and healthy and continuing, and how do we plan for the long term? And tools like this are part of that, especially as you think of leaders changing and teams changing and new projects being added all the time, new people stepping up in leadership, of how to take something that seems really scary and big and break it into something that we can do and that you can do, and that your 4-year-old helping assist the altar guild can be a part of. This is not a replace, I'm trying to say that, this is a support for those things we're talking about. Lauren, did you? Yeah.
So how do you take those 4 steps, specifically the last 2, how do you take note and observe things and then make corrections for, let's say, an event that only happens once, like a wedding, for instance, versus coffee hour, which is reoccurring, which you definitely take notes on things that are happening and need to be corrected the next time. How do you do that? We're like one shot and you're done.
So in some ways, these steps are not always cleanly sequential. Do doesn't mean the event is over before you check and adjust. There's kind of a sense that as we move forward, I'm constantly referring back to saying, what did we plan? What were our timelines? What are our milestones? So a wedding is a good example where we came up, where for any wedding, you come up with a plan, and that plan, even though you're not going to plan another wedding, that plan is still something you're checking and adjusting based on, we ended up having way more people say they're coming than we expected, so we're going to adjust the plan and shift. It also, I would say that there's probably, a gazillion weddings that have now been planned based on Jacob Lash's spreadsheet that he made for his wedding. However, that there is a sense of repetition that is possible, that as kind of the collective hive mind improves, we end up with resources of our church now, you need a meal for 200 people, press play. We got that covered, So there is a sense of hive mind that happens.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say.
Oh, great. Did you have something else you're going to add? Oh, okay. We're wrapping up now. Thanks. Those are really good questions, and I feel like they were really...
I was just going to say, I think that's a very good reminder of the PLC.
Oh, yes.
Because we've done a lot of the planning, but I would say right now our team is kind of checking, constantly checking.
Yes.
Group and making adjustments. And definitely the week of, we're going to need people on it, checking, making adjustments.
Exactly. I'll say that again for the live stream recording, the mic, that the PLC is an excellent example of us both learning to kind of put together a plan that could, in theory, be handed off to like a model for other churches to use, but also that a lot of planning happens at the beginning, and then the checking, adjusting happens over and over and over again as you approach the actual event. And it's also very wise after an event to have kind of a debrief. Jim Scrofani calls them hot washes. I don't know what he thought that was a less scary term than debrief, but I don't know what it means. So it sounds scarier to me. But like, for example, after Holy Week, we've kind of been in a routine where if we wait till next Septuagesima to think about what we learned this year, we will have forgotten. So after Holy Week, we gather together all the servers. I send an email to all the leaders and say, what did we learn? What went really well? What didn't go well? And I put it all in a note, I dump it all in a Word document so that next year I can open it and go, ooh, we need to remember this. And so that we can, that kind of checking and adjusting. So debriefing afterwards is a really huge part of that. Mary?
I was just going to add to that, since John did one that, I think Jonathan had asked, but examples of things that when you don't have it and it doesn't work, and Holy Week is a perfect example of that. We spent 5, 6, 7 years, like having 4-hour meetings, going into the week, and then still getting there and being like, we forgot this, oh, we were supposed to live stream this, and the GoPro's not charged, and like, until we finally were like, we could document this.
Yes. And we now have a set of, exactly. We have a Holy Week planning document. We have a live stream plan. We have, there's still, it's hilarious for people who do the same thing every year. How often we're like, how did that go again? But, we're learning on how the documentation can support, the liturgical community. I just want to say we're wrapping up. Thank you. These questions were really great. I feel like that brought a lot of important things together. I just wanted to close with the last slide on communication. I know I think if the frequency with which I have referred to this is in any indication of how important this is, we've said this a lot, that this is what makes the whole thing work, is effective communication. Just a reminder that personal communication is far better than impersonal. We have more communication aids at our fingertips than we know what to do with or can keep up with, but a lot of times they can become barriers to really effective communication. That if you can talk to someone that is a fuller and richer and more complete, greater sense of ownership, especially when we have a unique challenge of having a team of volunteers, direct communication is really important and really essential. The best options are face-to-face meetings where you can talk to people. Voice calls are so much better than texts and emails when possible. You need to realize what emails and texts are good for and let that be what they're good for, and then for anything else, really prioritize good communication. Group emails and text messages are necessary. I'm not saying they're not. I'm a professional at sending them. You get a lot of them. But knowing when it's better, our staff team has been really working on this, of knowing when it's more helpful to have a 5-minute conversation than to write a long email. And it's a lot easier to get on the same page. It's a lot easier to know that you're being heard and that you're really hearing the other person's concerns. So this is just don't be afraid of the phone. Don't be afraid of the phone call. Don't be afraid of the in-person conversation. Pushing through those and learning to have those is really, really significant. And a lot of times those hard things, they don't translate well into email. So if you're working through a storming situation or you're working through a really significant thing, it's so easy to kind of miss the interpersonal cues, especially we're brothers and sisters in Christ. This is so much more higher stakes. Like this whole presentation is about how to work out our salvation together. As the community of God, this is so much higher stakes than we're all co-workers. So communication is always important, and how much more so for us, and how much more so for these relationships. And, as much as we've broken things down into the 4 steps of team building and the 4 steps of project management, it's really all circles back to the fact that life is community and life is teamwork. And that doing that teamwork well is a part of how we work out our salvation. And that's, so this is so much bigger. The metaphysical reality behind this presentation. Don't miss that. That's the whole point. Our key takeaways: working in communion with God and the saints and one another is part of joyfully fulfilling our purpose. And it's a lot more. It's about so much more than just what we get done. But we'll be able to get done a lot if we do those things well. And we hope that this was a good reminder that these project management tools, particularly these planning tools, are really simple enough for anyone to use for any level of project, but really powerful enough to manage big elephants. So we're going to share these slides with you. I will create a PDF of our spreadsheet in case that's inspirational, is to help remember how you go through the journey from messy whiteboard to effective project plan. And we would have loved to share even more details with you. We were trying to distill something into something that could be inspirational and helpful really quickly. But please feel free to let me know if you have any questions along the way. And Avi, did you have a question? Okay, great. The next thing is to wrap up and bless the food and have lunch.
Thank you very much. You all hungry? So last Sunday, Micah was holding Esther, and the recession was over. We just finished the last hymn, and Esther, she said, "All done." She wanted to go eat in the parish hall, and I came out to do the announcements, and she said the longest sentence she's ever said. He said, "Papa, no talk." The grandkids call me Papa. A lot of the kids here at this church and the school, they're all like my children, and a lot of them come up to me and say, "Can we call you Papa?" I said, "Sure." Anyway, thank you. That was wonderful. So we're going to go eat, and we're going to come back, and the third session is nap time. If you want to sleep, you can. It's fine. But let's all stand. Let's just pray in here.
I have one more announcement before you pray, sorry. Bobby reminded me, this is a free event, no charge, but donations are really helpful to covering the food and all of the things for the event. If you would like, we're kind of suggested donation of $10 a person. You're welcome to give via PayPal or Venmo or any of the electronic things we use.